For a cold day. Yeah, it's a nice crowd for a cold day. What's the panel? I don't know if it. Is she coming up? Okay.
All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome. Go ahead and get started here. My name is Michael Shear. I'm the executive editor of the Dispatch, and it's our privilege to have you all here tonight to talk about this very important subject. When our reporters, Max Philby and Danae King and Better and Community Pile came to me 6 months ago or so to talk about this phenomenon. I don't know what the right word for it is, but this problem on any given day, 1,000 missing in Ohio. Some of them missing for maybe a few hours, some of them missing much longer, obviously. It's a staggering problem that we were happy to take time to investigate and report on. I think most of you are aware we ran the series a few weeks ago called Vanished. And we're going to start out today by showing you the trailer of that video here in a moment. But we're really glad you're all here for this conversation tonight. That'll be led by one of our other editors. Back in the back of the room, we have Ohio BCI here tonight, and they are taking DNA swabs of anyone who's had someone missing in your family for more than 30 days, and that could help down the road identify somebody, should that situation arise. So if you're interested in that, they're back there to help you out today. We thank them for being here tonight. So thank you to BCI for helping us out and also for helping us gather data and information for the series that published. So without further ado, I think we'll cue up the video here to show you that, and then I'll introduce our host for tonight.
Our society has an ideal we don't always need. Everyone counts, everyone matters. It's a tragedy when we fail that ideal, and I know it happens in this person.
Like the initial thought is like, oh, I'm gonna call the police, but then you realize they're not gonna do anything.
It don't matter if he's bipolar or not, you should still be looking.
Is he just gonna get another number, or is it just another missing child now?
Just not knowing is the painful thing. There's not a day that don't go by that I don't think of him missing. It don't make a difference what the circumstances are on any of these missing people. They're still a person, and they're still somebody's family.
So today's the day I've got.
All right, so that was the trailer video that ran with our series. There's a ton more videos on dispatch.com. If you want to check this out, the programs you have a QR code showing you how to get to all the content. I also want to thank all the families who took time to share stories with Max and Danae. I know it's not always easy to share these stories and do so in such a personal way as you saw in that brief video. So thank you for helping us tell the story and trusting us to tell your story in our newspaper and on our website. So without a further ado, I'm going to introduce Amelia Robinson, who's our opinion and community engagement editor, and she's going to be the moderator for tonight's forum. So Amelia.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everybody. First of all, I need you to give yourself a round of applause for coming out on this cold day. I know everybody thinks it's Tahiti, but Ohio is not Tahiti. It is cold outside, so the fact that you came out here is really admirable. So thanks for coming out. I'm going to bring Danae and Max on up too, so we can get our conversation started. And if you guys have questions for the panelists, we're going to be circulating some note cards. So raise your hand if you have a question, and Stephen here will take your question. So obviously, Max and Danae, you worked hard on this project. Why did you guys want to do something on missing people?
Yeah, so about a year ago, I met the family of Amina Alhaj Omar, who is an Ohio State University student who went missing. And I did a story about her on a copy that I was working. And when I met her family, her sisters, who worked really hard to find her, I was struck just by their experience. One of the things they told me was there's no playbook for this. Like, there's no guidebook or like any kind of guide to what you do when your loved one goes missing. And so that, was an experience I had a while ago. But when we started to look for something that we wanted to dig into, we really, I thought about her family. And I know there's a lot of families who have experienced things like this. So it was really the real people aspect that got me interested in this. I'll let Max answer too.
Yeah, no, so Danae's right. When we started looking for something more long-term to work on, we wanted to find something that really touched a lot of lives. And sadly, unfortunately, as you probably all know, as Mike mentioned at the start of our meeting tonight, on any given day, there are roughly 1,000 Ohioans who are missing. So when you think about that, right, that's 1,000 people missing, but think of how many people are in their families, how many people they know and whatnot. So that's really kind of why we wanted to do something on this.
So, like, if you've been a reporter for any length of time, you've covered a story about a missing person, right? You probably even have gone out with a search party and whatnot. I'm sure that's probably you guys' experience too. Was there anything about covering this series, though, that surprised you, even with your experience with missing people's stories?
Yeah, something that really surprised me is that there's a lot of people who go missing and no one might ever know. We found several cases where there wasn't, they might have been reported to the authorities, but there wasn't a poster posted anywhere. There weren't news reports. There was not a press release on them going missing. So there's a lot of people who go missing and nobody ever knows.
Yeah, I'd second that. I think like when somebody goes missing, right, we always think that like, okay, there's going to be this massive search party. It's going to be like all over the place on the news and everything. The truth is that a lot of people who go missing, they don't really get that much attention. So that's also one of the reasons why we wanted to really dive deep into this, because we wanted to shine a light on some of those cases, especially that might not have gotten as much attention as perhaps they deserved.
Was there an aspect of the story that you wish you would have gotten to, but obviously you can't write everything that's in your notebook?
So many. There's a lot of, we couldn't possibly tell the story of every person who has a missing family member. But it would be great if we could highlight every single one of those cases. There's also different aspects, like when an elderly person goes missing. We talked a lot about children and adults, but we didn't get to touch as much on people over 65 who go missing as I would have liked to.
Yeah, and I can't think of like one specific thing, but there are just so many personal stories. And that's the thing about missing persons, right? Is each story is kind of different of what happened to somebody or when they went missing, the circumstances. So I think there's probably, unfortunately, a lot of more stories we could tell on this.
One of the stories you did tell us about East Cleveland. Why did you focus on East Cleveland?
So East Cleveland, I don't know if anybody in this room knows much about it, but it's a suburb of Cleveland, Ohio, a city of around 13,000. And we decided to do a story on that because we had found that several dozen kids had gone missing there within the last decade. I believe it was roughly 40 some by the time we published the story. And the reason that's significant is in that time, there was a way higher rate per capita than the number of people who go missing in like Columbus or Cleveland or Cincinnati. That really stuck out to us. We were like, what's going on here? Deep dive into, the truth is, nobody knows for sure. East Cleveland is the city that is struggling under the weight of crime, poverty. The people in Cleveland, quite a few of them we talked to, think that trafficking might be one of the reasons why. That's sort of why we focused on East Cleveland for a story.
Is there anything that kind of unites, like you say, like this is the typical missing person stories? Did you find a typical missing person story, or was that?
No, honestly, there isn't really a typical one, which is what makes these cases so hard to investigate, which I'm sure we'll hear from law enforcement later about that. None of them are the same. I talked to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children several times during this, and over, the man who's in charge of their missing children unit told me there's no case that's the same. There's a detail in every case that differs from another.
So we have our friends from BCI in the back. Why did you guys want to make sure they were here?
Yeah, so we're so glad that BCI joined us. We really wanted to make sure they were here because we found that databases play a really important role in missing persons investigations and in finding people. So I'm going to let Max talk a little bit more about why those databases are so important and how what BCI is doing works with that.
Yes, so BCI is here tonight. They're going to be taking DNA collection from anybody who has a loved one who's been missing for 30 days or more, I believe. But so when it comes to the databases and missing people, there are quite a few of them, and I would throw several acronyms at you, but your eyes would glaze over, so I'm not going to do that. But essentially, there are so many different databases, and they don't all line up. They don't communicate with each other. They're not used the same way. So one thing as a result of our investigation is that hundreds of people in Ohio who have been missing for a year or more, most of them kids, are not listed in something called NamUs. Sorry, it's an acronym. National Missing and Unidentified Person System. And it is sort of the gold standard, right, for missing persons in databases. And the reason that's important is because if you go missing in Columbus, well, people in other states or jurisdictions, they need to know that you're missing too. And if you're not in some of these national databases, it's going to be much harder for law enforcement to find you. It might be much harder for an average person on the street to identify you from a photo too, if your photo's not in there.
So what do you hope the public's takeaway is from your project?
I hope there's more awareness about missing people and just how many people are impacted by this. I think a lot of people don't think about this issue until it happens to them, until their loved one goes missing. And then they don't know what to do. So I hope there's awareness, and I really hope that the tips that we compiled from advocates and experts and just families who have been through this can help somebody if it happens to them.
Okay.
I would just say I agree. I'd love for some of these cases to be solved. I really feel for the families who don't know what it's like having something go unsolved and not knowing what happened to your loved one for so long. So that's ultimately what I'd like to see done. But like Danae said, raising awareness. There's no playbook for when a person goes missing. We've tried to put one together for people and readers. So we hope you're able to take advantage of that and use it.
And what do you hope the state of Ohio does? Is there one thing from your reporting you go, well, if they did this thing, it will make things so much better for these families?
Yeah, I think requiring law enforcement officials who take these case reports to put this information in national, federal databases so that people across jurisdictions can help find missing people.
There are 16 other states that do require people to be entered into NamUs, that database that I mentioned earlier. The Attorney General himself said that he thinks perhaps it's time for a law change like that in Ohio. So yeah, I think that's definitely one of the action items that legislators could take a look at.
Okay, the last question, the reporter's favorite question. Anything else you want to say? Anything I didn't ask you that you think is important for folks to know?
Read the series. It's at dispatch.com/vanished. And yeah, we'd love to talk to anybody who's interested more about this.
Yeah, and if anybody here tonight has a story that we didn't cover in this series that you'd like to share with us, we'd be honored if you let us share your loved one's story. So please don't hesitate to come say hi after all of them.
Great. Well, thanks a lot, Max and Danae, for this series and your willingness to talk to us tonight. So now we're going to bring up Ricky and Lori. No, you're fine. And so if you guys have any questions, raise your hand and Steven's going to pass you out a note card. And at the end, we'll get some audience questions as well. I'm just going to chat with these guys for a little bit. Very hard essay questions. I hope you brought your dictionaries because you're going to, okay, you're going to need all that stuff. So first of all, I want to introduce the panel, and I'll have you guys, if you want to say a little bit about why you decided to come to the panel. We have Bree Belcher, whose best friend, Sequoia Cooper, is among the missing. Why did you want to come to be part of this panel?
To get just more information, insight on, the procedure of what goes on. Time goes on, and the pain it gets deeper, and like I just need to know. There's a lot of unanswered questions and things, and I want to know what are some things that I can do to bring my loved one back home.
Thank you. And now to my, was it left or right? I'm kind of messed up here. Right? We have Lori Davis, who is a victim advocate.
I came tonight just to share some experiences that I've dealt with because of my work with missing person cases. I do not have a missing loved one, but I have dedicated a lot of years now. I think it's been 18 years that I've been involved with the missing persons. And I just try to support the families. I try to, help guide them when they're lost and fill in some of those pages of that playbook that we don't have, and just try to help them understand, what needs to be done and what they should be doing for their missing person cases.
And last but not least, we have Chief Deputy from the Franklin County Sheriff's Office, Rick Minard.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm here. I had an opportunity to speak to Danae when she was putting the stories together. I don't know which one in particular, but she called my office and had some questions about how cases are handled by law enforcement. And so we had a pretty frank discussion about things that we do, the differences of missing cases versus other crimes. At the end of that conversation, she kindly invited me to be a part of this. I know that I'm the only representative from law enforcement here. I wish there were more of us here who could answer those questions. But honestly, I want to be here to answer as many questions and explain the process as much as I can. And hopefully, bring some of these folks back to.
So I'll start with you, actually, since we have it on you already. If your family member is unfortunately one of the ones who become missing, what's the first thing you should do?
Well, the first thing is, I guess it depends. So the question was, if everybody heard that, was what should you do first? I guess it depends on whether it's a juvenile or adult or what have you. We always encourage people to look for the individual themselves, call family, friends, or whatever. I know that's not possible if we're talking about a young child. If it's an adult or something like that, oftentimes people don't necessarily go missing. They don't want to be found for a little while. There's a lot of, it was mentioned earlier that all of these cases are different. And so doing a little bit of investigative work on the family's part first before they contact law enforcement. But as soon as possible, once you determine that I can't find this person, I know that there's a lot of anxiety, contact law enforcement and gather as much information as possible. These cases are difficult to work, and it's really reliant on the information that we receive. And so associates, work or habits, who they might be with, who they've been hanging out with, how they socialize, social media, things like that are all great things to provide law enforcement so that we can get a head start on this particular case. And again, these things are different. Young child versus an adult, those cases are much different. And earlier today, hopefully there are some efforts here to improve the way that we report here in Ohio. And so if someone goes missing, what happens is obviously there's a police report taken. There's some efforts that go forward as far as trying to find this individual. But what happens, we are entering a national database, leads NCIC. The problem with that system doesn't have a lot of the background information. That system doesn't have photographs. It's merely just an identifier. So if law enforcement would come across this person in a traffic stop or something like that and run their information, it would pop up as an alert that they're missing. That wouldn't necessarily happen in a young person situation where they might not be in a traffic stop or something like that. So those are some of the downfalls of the reporting system here in Ohio. But to answer your question, provide as much information as possible. I mean, the more leads, the better the situation is. And the unfortunate reality is that once we run out of leads, then we're kind of stuck too. And I know that's not what families want to hear, but that's the reality of it. Is when we run out of people to follow up, or we don't have numbers, or what have you to chase down, we run out of leads. That case tends to go cold. Unfortunately, we don't have enough resources, and so it's sort of for those in the room who remember this show, but it's like MASH. It's triage, and so you're as an administrator, I'm constantly moving assets to cases in terms of priority, and that priority depends on the leads at hand and whether those are fresh leads that we can chase down. So those are some of the realities of it. But gather as much information as you can.
So if somebody's working this space, what would you recommend folks do?
Someone goes missing,
Yes.
like what would they do first? I would be very, very clear on, when they were last seen, where they were at, what their mental status was like at that time. A lot of people don't want to like talk to the doctor, talk to the police and say to them that, they may have been impaired by drugs. That may help that law enforcement agent, deal with it differently, because if I go missing as a 52-year-old woman, you're going to look for me in different spots, right? You're going to you're going to know that I did not go missing willingly, that, I did not choose just to run away, because my family knows me enough. They know my mental status. They know that I'm not into anything, any drugs or any, situations that could be putting me at risk. So that's going to direct that law enforcement agency in different ways to deal with your case, because they're going to get the whole picture. And I think some families get embarrassed or they're ashamed and they don't want to be, completely honest, and they don't want to out their missing person. They don't want to make that known. I would highly recommend be as honest as you can, be as thorough as you can, make a list of what they were wearing when they were last seen, all the details of distinguishing characteristics, scars, tattoos, piercings. All of those details are going to help. Get as many different photos. Don't get the photo where they look perfect, right? Like with their graduation photo, because that's not what people look like in an everyday life. Get things that if somebody sees them out in the public, they may recognize them. Short hair, long hair, different looks even. Brian Schaefer, one of these cases, he was a medical student. He can look really cleaned up in a lot of his photos. But then I've also seen photos of with longer, shaggy hair. We need to see all of that so that we don't know what he would look like at this point, right? So get as many details like that as you can. And if they were talking, in a way that you feel that they may have been suicidal, that is very important to let law enforcement know as well. You may be told by some law enforcement agencies they're an adult, they're allowed to leave. That is true. That is not against the law. They are allowed to leave. But a family, and I'm a firm believer in this, families know their family members, right? So I trust that family more than I trust what law enforcement is saying when they've heard 15 minutes of my case. So make sure that you are representing them well so that you can say, this is absolutely out of the norm and I need your help. And this is important. And then I would also be that squeaky wheel. I understand they're understaffed. They cannot dedicate their entire, shift to finding your loved one. But I would want them to know my loved one is still missing. What can I do to help? What other steps can we take? I do not want this case to become a case. I want, something to be moving forward at all times, if possible. So.
And what did you guys do when Sequoia came in?
We knew it was very abnormal for her to go missing, so we went to the police and told the police what was going on, and the police, which told us to give it give it a little more time, make sure that she's not out. Unfortunately, like it was said, like drugs and stuff. In the beginning of our the investigation, like Sequoia, she did use drugs at one point in time, but like her boyfriend was saying things like, "Oh no, she don't use drugs anymore. She don't use drugs anymore." And like I was trying to reiterate to him, like this is not the time to lie. This is not the time, this is not the time for that, because that could be very important. But probably 15 hours, maybe she didn't come home, like after a whole day cycle, and then we end up contacting law enforcement.
So now we have you. You have the mic. Obviously, she became missing the same time Gabby Petito became missing, and obviously Gabby's case became like this big national story. As a family member, what was that like for you to see this story become so big, and you're wondering where your loved one is? And also, why do you think certain stories get more attention than others? It's a complicated question. I'm sorry.
Uh, it's, I'm sorry. I don't know why. It was very hurtful because we're going through the same thing at the same time, and it feels like they were just specially just picked, for 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 the media attention that they got. And I was just like sitting in a corner by myself, and nobody cared all the while that Gabby was becoming a household name, And I'm not trying to take anything from her, from what she went through or anything, but that brings me to the same question: what 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 is different about Gabby and Sequoia that makes her story go national and get so much news coverage than Sequoia? Because I mean, we, I mean, we, we reiterated to the police that it was different. It was out of her character. This is not right. She's a manager. She has an everyday life. This is not right. That 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 something's not right. But again, they did what I believe what they could do. But all the while, I'm sitting at home watching Gabby's face all over the TV, and I have a level miss, and it was very hurtful. But every case is different. There's no telling why she was on that. There could have been something. There could have been something in her case that was not in Sequoia's case that made her become a top priority. So it was very hurtful. But again, what could I
Thank you. And what do you think, Lori? Why do some cases get more attention?
I wish I could answer that. I don't understand it. I haven't the entire time I've been involved. When I got involved with Brian's case, and he got a lot of attention. He was out there on the news all the time. There were searches when he first went missing. Everybody was involved in wanting to find Brian. And after I was involved for years, I started to realize there were a lot of Brians that were not getting attention. And there were a lot of, females that were not getting attention. And I ended up creating a Facebook page to try to bring attention to all of those cases. And as long as they had a law enforcement, entry and they had registered them as a missing person, we tried to publicize them because, in my opinion, every single case deserves it. I don't care what the circumstances were. Those families still need answers, and they're hurting as bad as Gabby's family was, or as bad as Sequoia's family was. They're all hurting the same way. So one of the things that I recommend is when you see missing person cases, even on Facebook or other social media platforms, share those cases. You have no idea how that's going to help a case. You don't know when that right person is going to see that poster and have information that you might not even realize is important, but one little tiny thing might help in some way. So my best advice is I don't care what the person's background was. I don't care what they look like. I don't care. I think that every single case is important and deserves to be publicized and get the attention that all the cases get.
Let's teach it from a law enforcement perspective. Why would you say one case might get more than another case?
I think it's prioritizing those cases. And so the manner in which somebody went missing, the circumstances under which they are missing from their loved ones, whether it was an abduction or something like that, but also the risk factors that accompany that. And so, example, a young lady goes missing and she's got a history of domestic abuse from a boyfriend. He's made statements in the past that if you leave me, no one will have you, those sorts of things like that. That case is going to get elevated in terms of priorities and the resources that are shifted to that, as opposed to somebody who, and I'm not saying it's important, but somebody who just didn't show up to an appointment and they have no enemies or kind of stuff. That case doesn't get the same attention as the one that has risk factors that accompany it. So that's the unfortunate reality. Last year, my office had, I checked before I came here, we had 194 cases. I'd like to tell you that all 194 got the same attention, but the reality is they didn't. Some of those cases got more attention than others, but it has to do with the manner in which they went missing and the factors that contribute to the at-risk, the age of the individual, how long they've been missing. I mean, there's a laundry list of things that could change one case from another. But to say that one is more important or one loved one is more important, that's not the case at all. It's based on what the information we have given at that time.
One of the key factors in the series was this runaway, and how we think about runaways. Should we as a society change our perspective on runaways, or how should we do it?
Yeah, I think that there's this. We talked about at the beginning of this about stigma. Runaways is probably not sort of a socially accepted term, but what we're talking about are people who generally young people between the ages of probably 14, 17 years old, who whether they have some kind of mental health situation, whether addiction plays a part. Maybe their family dynamics are not one that they got grounded or whatever the situation is, and they intentionally go missing. What that also means is they are intentionally evading law enforcement's efforts to find them, or family members' efforts to find them as well. So that complicates the situation and makes it much worse when you go to talk to a friend who knows they don't want to be found, and so the friend's not forthcoming with information. That's pretty common situation. Maybe the friend doesn't trust law enforcement. Maybe the friend doesn't want them to be returned to the family dynamic where they ran away from, and so those are contributing factors to that.
I agree with everything that you said. I think the thing about runaways that I worry the most about is they're very, very vulnerable, and they do not understand that. A lot of them are not of a mature level that can really sit and look at the situation and realize that they're putting themselves in extreme danger, especially with the human trafficking that goes on. And the human traffickers, they look for that. They're vulnerable teenagers that are making poor decisions. They normally don't have money or cash, any resources available because they're running. They can't go home and get money from their mom and dad. So they're going to make really poor choices at times. So I totally agree with what you said. I also think that you can almost get burnout sometimes, because if you go and look at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, there are tons of children that go missing every single day, and they're found within so many hours. So if you're publicizing every single one of those cases all over, everywhere, and getting their face out there, people, you as a society, in a community, get burnt out on it, because you're seeing a case and another case, and then you realize they're being found, relatively quickly. That is not to say that the runaways are not important. It's a very fine line, because they are at risk. In my opinion, they're probably one of the most at risk, because they don't have the ability mentally to understand.
Yeah, just that. I told you we had 194 cases. I don't know how many of those, but I promise you, some of those cases are repeat people that have run away. These are individuals that were found, they were taken home to their loved one. Literally the next day, they ran away again because they don't want to be there. And unless they're a ward of the state or involved in some child protective service situation where we can make them to the facility, return them home in an environment they don't want to be in, well, you can suspect that they're probably going to run away again, whether that be the next day or the next week or the next month. So I can't tell you how many. I probably looked that up before I got here. But to her point, those are also the ones that create sort of that compassion fatigue. If you're an investigator, I'm an investigator, and I've just invested days looking for this person, and I get them back home, and of course the parents are elated that they're back home, but then the next week they're missing again. I spend that effort again, and the next week I return them home, and they're missing again. It's hard to blame the investigator who then runs out of compassion for that situation with somebody who is sort of a repeat runaway.
Like, so obviously, earlier, the child doesn't necessarily know the ramifications of their actions. What needs to be done as a society, and this might be out of you guys' wheelhouse, to sort of break that cycle of running away and come back, run away. I don't know. Might be
I don't have, I wish I did. Know though that when that happens, I've even seen person cases where they're found, everybody's excited, and then they're missing again, like you said, the next day, the next week, whatever. Um, I wish there was more that we could do to prevent that, but I think a lot of that may be the family situation. It may be the immaturity of the person, the lack of skills to be able to deal with conflict at home. Maybe that the parents are absolutely fine, might not be those parents' fault. It just may be, I mean, we all know how teenagers can be at times. They're rebellious, and not every teenager, but some are. So, I don't have the answer to that, but I do think something needs to change.
Yeah. So obviously, you go back to the chief deputy here. So you have Amber Alert, and you said earlier, and everybody knows that law enforcement has some deficits in far as staffing, right? You always get more officers than you have. Are there tools though that you wish you had in Ohio that we don't have? Are there tools or things that you wish you had, maybe other states have that we should maybe consider for Ohio?
Yeah, I think some of the databases being able to communicate better and in a more timely um, would be helpful. Um, when you leave one jurisdiction and you go to another, and those databases don't communicate or don't talk, and so you got to get on the phone and call those folks. Then you get somebody who maybe isn't invested in the case as much as you are, and well, I'll call you back and all that kind of stuff can be discouraging. So an improvement in databases. I think there's a lot of resources. I'll cheer for BCI. I often if BCI had a fan club, I'd be the president of it. I'm a big fan of BCI and the resources that they bring to mind. There's a number of databases that they bring. Obviously, the DNA and the laboratories that are available. But also they run CART teams, folks with CART teams around the state. Those are child abduction response teams. CART stands for. And what that is basically a task force of people that come from a number of jurisdictions, different jurisdictions, who are trained on what to do in these situations. So if you're a small community and you call your law enforcement, they get out there, they take a report, but they're not used to these investigations, and so they're like, "What do we do next?" They can reach out to one of the CART team. The CART team brings a ton of resources to that community, floods it with officers and technology and people that do this all the time. And so they have a better idea of how to handle these situations. Those CART teams are ran by the Ohio Attorney General's office. So there's a number of resources out there. I'm so glad that they're here. But I would say the biggest need, probably an improvement in terms of the databases and the way that they communicate from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, even here in Ohio, let alone outside the state.
I agree with what he said. If he's the president of the fan club, I'm going to be the vice president. Okay, because I love BCI. An example, Brian had been missing for, I believe it was 4 years. Law enforcement had been involved, and remember, Brian was one of the cases that got a lot of attention, right? So you would think that all the check were checked, right? We found out, I believe it was 4 years into it, that DNA had not been collected on Brian. And that was alarming to me at that point, because at that point, his dad was deceased, his mom was deceased. We did not realize that there had not been DNA collected. Luckily, we were able to get that done, and it was through BCI. So they are wonderful. They have helped in so many cases. When somebody goes missing, always tell them, reach out to them, get their missing listed on their site as well. It's very important, the more sites you can be listed on. And when he was talking about, the databases, I am a firm believer in, if one of your loved ones goes missing and you do have to file a report, make sure that they list them on NamUs. And I know that this has been mentioned a few times tonight, but you as a family member can add them on NamUs. Now, law enforcement will still need to go and be a representative of that case, but you can submit them yourself. You can submit the photos, you can submit, I believe you can even turn in their dental records. If not, you can get them to law enforcement and law enforcement can get them. And one thing that I want to make sure that I talk about too, I missed it on some of the other talks, but when she asked me what you should do if a person goes missing, like you're a missing loved one thing I want to make sure that everybody hears tonight is make sure that you keep a list, write down every detail, okay? Because you're going to think that you will remember those details until that person comes home. You don't know how long that's going to be, right? And you will forget that over time. So you write down, I contacted law enforcement on this day. I got them listed at NamUs on this day. I provided their dental records on this day. We got DNA, all of those steps. You need to write that down. Write down all of their friends and family. Check those phone records, especially if you're on a family plan. You can go in and look at your family's phone records and you can look at that without having to get a subpoena or a court order to get those if you're all in that family plan. So those are some more things that I thought of that I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned tonight as well.
Now, Bree, Sequoia's been missing for 3 years now.
Yes.
What do you want people to know about her that may help find?
That's the only thing I can say about every person is that they're human. They deserve to be with their loved ones, with their family. And if they're not there, it causes a lot of pain. But it doesn't get old. It doesn't. It stays fresh. Like just sitting in this room, it's been 3 years, and I'm in my head right now trying not to cry because it's just I realize that she's actually these people are actually gone, and and they're hurt, and they're just human. They deserve to be with family. That's what I think.
Thank you. Now, you're an advocate, and I don't think people understand exactly what goes. The first thing to say, if you have a question, Stephen has cards. We're going to take some questions from the audience. You're an advocate. What do you do as an advocate? Why would you say a family needs advocates through this?
Oh, I believe with any traumatic situation, a family needs an advocate, whether it's a person, a death, anything that is traumatic. I think an advocate can really help you. What I do for the families that I become involved in is I try to give them, well, I connect them with resources. I connect them with other family members. I try to give them that checklist to say, do these 10 things, make sure you've done that. I try to give them hope, and we've done candlelight vigils, we've done prayer vigils, we've done all kinds of things to try to bring attention to missing person cases. I've done churches, walk the riverbanks, all kinds of things just to help those families. And I will say, and I'll reiterate what Bree said, I don't think that you can understand the depth of pain that the missing families go through. It is not even a death. When you have a death, you know where that person is. It's final. It's very traumatic. It's hard to get through, but you have answers, right? I have watched so many of these missing person family members go through such an uncertainty, and it's almost like their life. They try to move on. They try to go on, but there is that hole that is never filled, and it's always there. It doesn't ever go away. And I understand with the death that happens as well. It's a different type of a pain, and I wouldn't wish it on anybody. The pain that I've watched these families go through is indescribable, and I pray that none of you in this room have to experience it. And if you do, I'll be there, and I'll try to help you through that as much as I can.
You know what? Okay. This is probably like I don't know who this is best for, but the question is, what recourse or alternative courses action do I have if law enforcement is empathetic to my loved one's case?
Be the grease or the squeaky wheel. I mean, you've got to make them understand that you're not going away. I've watched Andy Chapman's family. They are a prime representative of this. They are that squeaky wheel and they won't stop. And it's 18 years later since their loved one has gone missing. You need to make sure that you will help them as much as you can, but you also need to let them know that you're not going away. Like you're going to be a case that they will remember, and hopefully that will help them when it when they have that burnout with missing person cases. You'll realize like this case isn't going away. Like I need to put some more effort into this, and I am a firm supporter of law enforcement. My uncle was even killed in the line of duty. So, I mean, I support law enforcement completely. So nothing that I say here means anything bad against law enforcement, but I have seen a lack of empathy that has really appalled me just as a community member and a person with how families have been treated. They have been told things like, you know, your husband is just one missing person. I have 100 on my caseload. And thank God that person spoke back and said, I have one husband. And my child has one father. So I'm sorry you've got 100 on your caseload, but this is my husband and this is the father of my child. So I would try to get them to understand it in ways just like that. I get it. You've got a lot on your caseload. I need my husband back, or I need my daughter back, or however you can make them understand that, this is a person and they deserve that same, empathy that all of us deserve.
Like one of the factors was that time and time again, people said in the story that they felt like law enforcement ignored them. What do you think that comes from? And is it true that law enforcement is ignoring them? Or is there something else that the person might be missing?
Well, I like to think that law enforcement's not ignoring them. But here, the conversation that Danae and I started out with, she called me because she had gotten some information that someone with my office had given an answer to a family who had lost a loved one who went missing and was later discovered to have been murdered, if I remember correctly. And she was told by the family that someone from our office had basically said that they didn't have time. They were too busy to look for the loved one. And so she called me to ask me about that. That's not how I want our people to respond because that's not true. And then we got into a greater discussion about whether there were leads involved in that case or not. And so, no, I should not be responding in a way that it's not caring or what have you. In a situation where it's one of, I got one of cases, that's never acceptable for law enforcement to give that answer to the community or to a loved one who is hurting. In terms of the apathy, I like to think that it isn't apathy. I like to think that it's just a lack of direction. What can people do? Your question was, what can people do? Be the squeaky wheel. I always encourage people to do that. If you want to keep people alive, well, then keep bringing their phone, keep asking questions, keep offering your support and help what you can do. Offer that support to law enforcement. What are you having trouble obtaining? I might be able to obtain on my part. Look for other resources outside of the local law enforcement agency that you're dealing with, whether that be through BCI or maybe a larger agency within that community. It's difficult for an agency. I come from a large agency to come in and bully somebody out of their case, but what we often do is offer support resources to whoever the lead agency is in that case. So, if you were to call my office and the case around Central Ohio, that's exactly what I would do. Is I would reach out to that agency who's handling the case and say, "Here's what was told to me, and I'm offering resources to help you guys solve this case and bring the loved one home." But unfortunately, in every profession, people are representative of the whole. And yeah, we have some folks that say things that are hurtful and unsavory. As an administrator, it's not a good representation of who we are or who we want to be.
So, Bree, did you guys face apathy when you were dealing with Sequoia's case? And how did you fight through it to keep her name out there?
We did. basically, what we know from Sequoia is the same thing today as what we know Sequoia originally came up missing. The same details, same everything. There has been no information. There has been no detectives calling. There has been none of that for us. So to the point now, we don't. I mean, we don't even contact them. We and it might be a great idea for that, but I mean, we get frustrated, and then we don't want to, you know, blow a head gas at them, and they're supposed to be the ones who. So if they call us and contact us, then that's what. But in the meantime, I personally started doing my own investigation.
What does that look like in your investigation?
I don't have the resources that they have, but I am finding some things that are questionable, and I don't have nobody to ask questions to. Because even the person who was head of the I don't detective rep maybe. Well, detective that I don't even believe he's in that department. So things have changed. It have changed hands, and maybe it has changed for the better for a fresh pair of eyes, or maybe it has not. So it's all a waiting game there, and just had to not going.
So this person wants to know what are good internet sites to connect to, let's say, my brother, but what are some of the internet sites that people can use to connect with those other folks?
There are a ton of groups on Facebook. I'll be honest, Facebook's what I use. I'm not real good on the other sites, so I can talk mostly about Facebook. But there are a ton of groups out there. You can post your missing loved ones information, and they'll even help you with that investigation stuff. Like they'll try to pull together. Sometimes it's other missing families, sometimes it's not. If you ever want to get in touch with other missing families from Ohio, I've got a card back there that you could always reach out to me, and I could get you in touch with other people that have walked your path, which I think is really, really important because you all learn from each other. Person A might have but you didn't know that yet, and you start talking and sharing that, and that can be very beneficial. So I would definitely go to the BCI, the missing person for the Ohio Attorney General site. They also have Project Link that would give some information as well. It's actually, when you go out to the Ohio Attorney General site, I just did it last night, they have a whole list of different sites as well about missing person cases. So that might be where you would want to start as well.
This person has a question about names. They brought up that they were shocked that names weren't put in the name, and they want to know basically what can we do as an average citizen to affect or accelerate change.
Well, I think we've got to get that changed. We've got to get a bill passed in Ohio that's going to make that a law that they have to do that because it's so important. Like one thing when we talked about it earlier, it's not only important so that if the missing person is in Kentucky so that they can be identified. God forbid if that person is deceased in a different state, they can use NEMIS to find them, which that is not going to happen normally. If the body is found in Kentucky, but they went missing in Ohio, one of the best resources will be NEMIS to make that connection because they have a whole section about unidentified individuals as well. So I think that we have to get an initiative that we can go and get that as a bill that will be passed about the NEMIS because, like you said, 16 other states have it. Ohio needs that. That's very important.
So we're talking about naming, so I'll ask you this, Chief Deputy. You indicated that DB databases are important, but you put everyone's name as voluntary.
So the short answer is the ones that are missing that go beyond a certain period of time. I want to say it's like 30 days would be that. So NamUs has been around for quite some time, and I don't want to speak for NamUs or whatever, but I will tell you that NamUs is not um, a database that is well known among law enforcement in general. NamUs is known for people who do missing work, but for the average patrol officer, what have you, I bet if you randomly selected 10 patrol officers on the street and asked them what is NamUs and how is it used, more than 50 of them would probably tell you, I don't know. And that's unfortunate. It's not a mandated reporting system for Ohio, as we've already pointed out. NamUs first, when I first heard about it, NamUs was a database that information went in for pretty much unidentified uh, things like that. It's sort of grown from there. It's much more robust than it once was when I was doing missing work. I'm a chief house. I don't do that work every day, but when I was doing it, it wasn't a whole lot to NamUs. So it has continued to grow, and so I think as awareness continues and
The time is 7:30 and the library is 30 minutes. If you need to call for a ride, please do so now.
Everybody call for a ride.
So I think as much as awareness continues to grow, events like this, more stories by the dispatch and other media outlets, people will learn more about what missing is and isn't. There's a lot of misnomer with it, a lot of misconception, a lot of stigma. We've already talked about stigma associated with the background of those folks. But, yeah, NamUs is growing, and it's something that ideally that every agency, every law enforcement agency should know about and know what its capabilities are.
I'd like to say one thing about NamUs. I actually got to meet and I became good friends with one of the main people that started NamUs. It was Todd Matthews. And you go look it up tonight if you get a chance. He found and solved a missing person case that was from his father-in-law's property years back. I don't remember the year that it happened. But they had found unidentified remains on his father-in-law's property, and it was a female in a tent. It was called the Tent Girl. And that is what got Todd involved in all of this. And that's what made him, he was so involved and he was so dedicated. And he really put all of his time, energy, and effort into making NamUs what it became. Todd unfortunately passed away last year, unexpectedly. Certainly all of us missed Todd, but his work still lives on. Now, another thing that I'd like to say is I think that another thing that we could do to make things better for missing is to get that education to these law enforcement agencies. They don't like that 50% of those law enforcement agencies probably do not know about NamUs. That needs to change. And I don't know how we do that. You know, I would be willing to go out and go down a checklist with different law enforcement agencies for free just to go out and get that information there because we need that. We don't want all of these agencies not understanding the resources that are available in missing person cases. That may help the burnout, right? If they know that there's other resources, maybe we help them not burn out as much because they've got things that they can use now and utilize. So that's another thing I think that needs to change.
There's a question here about who exactly. There's a couple questions actually about demographics and who the missing people are. One question is which demographics are the highest missing in numbers, and also how much is this to do with human trafficking and international human trafficking, I suppose. Do you have any insight about who the missing are and why they might have been taken? Yeah, you didn't know you were.
None of my other friends are here. So. Demographics, I mentioned the age as far as demographics in terms of race and whatnot. I think it constantly changes. So our missings, I checked before we left, we have 19 active missing cases right now, and they date back, I want to say 2021 is our oldest. I could be wrong, but those numbers and those cases change nearly daily because every day somebody's being found and every day somebody new is going missing. And so those 20 cases that we have now won't be the same 20 cases, say next month, next year. In terms of the demographic, I think what mostly comes down to is the most vulnerable, the ones that are missing and probably at most risk are those young people, and those are the ones that unfortunately we don't give enough attention to. Those people that, you know, whether it's addiction or what have you, mental health, family dynamics, some of them are in group homes, and they go missing. And so those are the ones also that are most difficult to locate too, because they're savvy, they're street savvy, they're savvy with social media and so forth. And so again, if they don't want to be found, it makes it really difficult on us. It's not uncommon for us to knock on a door where we get a tip where some missing is. We knock on the door and they say, "Oh, nope, haven't seen them. They're not here." They very well may be there. But without some kind of enough information that rises to the level of probable cause to execute a search warrant on that house, we got to walk away and hope for more information to go back to that residence. Or if we have the resources available, set up surveillance and see who's coming and going, and scrub social media. And that can be, the bureaucracy with getting social media to release information to us, or phone records. That's where a family who's actively involved in the case can be really helpful to law enforcement.
Oh, thought you were going to say something.
Well,
No, you
I was
drew.
going to, and no. I
Okay.
decided not to.
Okay, so several times people have said there isn't a playbook for how to handle a missing person. But is there research? Are law enforcement or other entities collecting data to identify what tactics are more or less successful? You know of any data at all out there?
I don't know of any data. I can tell you that this was a few years, like probably 7 years ago, we did get the opportunity to go meet with the Ohio Attorney General at that time. It was Richard Cordray, and he did let us sit down and basically help create a playbook. So I know that's been done before. Now, we have not been able to get in, with the current Ohio Attorney General. So I'm hoping that we could do that, and we could just share some of the experiences, get some families there, let them come in and talk and say, I wish this would have been done or this would have been handled differently. And I would love to try to help create that playbook again. I don't know if anybody's, collecting the data though right now.
No, I was gonna say, as I've been going through what I've been going through, there is is it Polly?
Yeah, Polly Class.
Her father, I believe he has an outline on his website or so forth of what to do as far as if a loved one goes missing.
You were right. Yeah.
Polly Klein, one more time, say the name.
It's Polly Class. It's KLAAS, I believe.
Polly Class. Okay.
And yep.
This is probably a question for you, Chief Deputy. How do you deal with new Americans and with missing persons cases?
Dealing with new Americans introduces a whole host of challenges. I mean, quite honestly, some of the folks that come from other countries, there's a distrust that exists with their government, in particular law enforcement. And so when they come to the U.S., and this is not just exclusive to missing person cases, this is whether we're talking about domestic situation, domestic violence, and so forth, there is a reluctance to cooperate with law enforcement. And so we don't know how many, we know about the cases that they report missing, but that same distrust leads to people not reporting missing their loved one, reporting their loved one missing because of that reluctance to deal with law enforcement. And then you introduce the differences in terms of culture, in the way that you deal with certain cultures versus others, and who is the representative of the family who speaks and so forth. Those could be challenges. And then the language barriers. That's always a challenge. I think that law enforcement's getting much better. I think we're recruiting people from different communities, diverse communities, so that we have those resources available. I know that my office, quite honestly, I don't really have a time when I can't get a hold of somebody in our office that speaks. I'm sure there's a dialect out there that we're not representative of, but whether it be the Hispanic community or what have you, or Somali or whatever, we have a number of people that work in our agency. So generally speaking, I don't have a problem getting a hold of somebody who can come and translate those situations. But I think it's the distrust really that's the biggest barrier that exists when we're talking about new Americans.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask my favorite question always. Are there things that you want to say that we didn't get to during this discussion?
I would. Is there a line that there that when is there a line? Is there even a line to cross between there's been an open investigation and until borderline cruelty to me? Is what is there? I don't even know what question I'm asking.
Like when it would go to a cold case? Is that what
Yeah,
you're
like
asking?
when I can't even word it. When is it like? Is there a time? Like I don't know. Like because I feel like when you I don't know.
You said, is there like a point where it's cruel to the family that they're not getting more information?
Yeah, instead of keep saying this is an open investigation, this is an open investigation. I think that's like a run to when they don't want to address certain situations. Is there like what can we do about that if that's the answer that we keep getting?
That's a good question.
Or not an open investigation? I don't know.
Well, you can file public. The question is, what can you do? Again, that's an answer that I don't know the situation, but one of my folks, I wouldn't want them telling a loved one it's just an open investigation. And I can't really tell you anything else, or not sharing that information. That's not the approach we should be taking. They should do a better job of explaining why that they're not actively looking at it in terms of the lack of leads, and they should be asking more questions of you. You talked earlier about conducting your own investigation. When you're conducting your own investigation and you call the police department and they tell you, well, it's open and we're not really working on it. I would hope that the information that you shared with them that you have revealed or uncovered yourself, that those would in some way create new opportunities or new leads for them to make it an active investigation, so that they will be out beating the streets and looking for your loved one. So I would hope that whoever it is you're talking to keeps an open mind. If you don't think that's happening, then you listen. Sometimes you got to go up the chain of command, and you got to get somebody who's a decision maker, who can then tell them, no, this is what I want you to do. That happens occasionally in my office. People will call in. They get to me. I hear their story. And sometimes my investigators were not listening. They were doing more talking than they were listening. And so, sometimes it means lighting a fire under their rear end. To your point, requesting records, if you request your investigation, I'm not sure why, if you're the reporting party, why they wouldn't release that information to you. The only thing that you might get is if there were, what you're probably going to get is you're going to get a public record version of that. What is a public record version? And so in Ohio, you can request public records from any government entity, and we have to release those things. There are some things that we can protect, but in this situation, what would happen is we would release that file and we would redact any uncharged suspects, social security numbers, anything that the law requires us to redact and not release. But the meat of the investigation, you could read between the lines and see what they did or didn't do on this case, and maybe come up with some ideas of your own in terms of how that case could be pursued moving forward.
So, and just Sequoia's case, she's been missing 3 years, and I request records. Just from your experience, should I be getting one piece of paper back?
No, and I hate to sit up here and beat other agencies up, but we could spend all night doing that. Beat up my own agency. No, but if you're the reporting party and you're the mother, and I'm sure there's administrators out there that would disagree with me. I'm just telling you what my office would do. Those requests would come to me, and I would say give them what they're asking for. They're the reporting party. They're the loved one. They want to know what we did. I want to be transparent, but I'm going to redact what I have to redact by law. There's certain things I can't release,
which is understandable.
Otherwise, I get sued by people. But other than those redactions, I'm going to release it. And so I don't know why the reluctancy in doing that. I mean, it's
yeah.
Be transparent. If you don't stand behind your work, to be transparent and put it out there. I mean, I don't know the particulars of the case, but it's just my thoughts on it.
Okay. Was there things that you wanted to say that we didn't get to? It's okay if I was an excellent interview and we got to all of
You had
it.
so many great questions.
Well, thank you. Say it louder for my boss in the back.
Give this lady a raise. Here, I just hope that we bring awareness to this. I want to thank the Columbus Dispatch for the work that they put into this. It's not easy work going out and talking to loved ones who are going through a very emotional time, a very hurtful time. You heard from one of the panelists here who is not happy with what.
May I have your attention, please? The library will be closing in 15 minutes.
When
I
I'm
don't
talking.
know. Please see a staff member. If you need to call for a ride, please do so now. Thank you.
Does anybody need to call for a ride before I? No, I just want to thank the dispatch for putting the work into this. It's tough work, but hopefully it brings awareness to this situation. Hopefully the folks that are here, the folks that will view this, will learn something about it, maybe fill in a blank that you didn't know. But hopefully that awareness leads, as I mentioned when we started this thing, I hope it leads to, that a lead, maybe a story, somebody sees this and says, well, I know that person, or I saw them, somewhere. And hopefully it leads to bringing somebody, your loved one, home. Again, I'm the chief deputy of Franklin County Sheriff's Office, and so missing persons falls under my command. So if there's somebody in the audience that has a case that we're responsible for, and you are unhappy with the way that that's been treated, absolutely reach out to me, and I'll do my very best to make sure that it's getting the adequate treatment, your case, that it deserves. And so again, thank you for being here. Thank the panelists up here. They're going through a very difficult time. And my prayers are with you to bring back your loved one safely.
I would reiterate a lot of what he said. I really appreciate that the Columbus Dispatch has done this series. It's amazing. Like in the 18 years I've been involved, I haven't seen anybody do something like this to this degree. So give them a big round of applause. And I hope if you learn nothing else tonight, that you learned that people do care about your missing loved ones. We do. There's people out there that you don't even know that care, and that we are willing to help as much as we can. Reach out to me if anybody wants my help. I'm more than willing to do that. And just know I pray for missing persons every single night before I go to bed. I pray for a lot of them by name. I know their cases. I know their families. Some of them are like my family now because I've been so involved in their cases. So I hope that gives you some hope to let you know that people do care.
Thank you. Well, we're going to close out the program, but I think Bree wanted to do a poem. While she's getting that ready, I just want to thank you guys for coming out. There's one question about what the next step is for the Columbus Dispatch, and I can just tell you that Max and Danae are going to follow up and do some other stories as they come along on this this topic. So stay tuned to the Dispatch. Yeah.
I have not. I wrote this poem. I did not title it, but it is for those who are missing in Ohio. Missing in Ohio. Do you know what lies between that phrase? It is missing loved ones, human beings, like the rest of humanity. They were beautifully flawed individuals with rights and names. We love them so much that we have no sense of direction, and we remain on this dreadful search. Agencies, we don't intend to be overbearing, but it seems like answers of the truth will only stop the hurt. I sit and daydream about you, but there's a little peace knowing that you are always brave, spiritually holding on to faith when realistically deep down inside, I know this hour may come too late. The good times we shared and the memories we made to be reduced to t-shirts with photos and mothers left with embracing picture frames. Just know that far or near, that we will always be connected. There's days when I want you home so bad, I begin to become my own detective. So time flies by and still no leads recorded. If it's not by skin, what prejudice do you guys use to decide which families gets news coverage and the top tier resources? It's been an easy. It has not been an easy road, but through the strength of you, somehow I remain strong. It doesn't matter if it's heaven or earth. I will still have every intention on meeting you home.
Thank you for that. It's beautiful. Well, thank you guys for coming out, and please get home safely and stay warm. And we hope that your loved ones are found safely. Thank you for that beautiful poem. Yeah, yeah. And if you ever wanted to, if you ever want to write a guest column about or anything.